My mother, she just unfortunately passed away after a battle with an illness. However, I came to realize a few weeks after, she's not my mom. She was my aunt. And it turns out that my real mother came forward and she's explaining to me now why she had to give me up. Tell me, how's the right or at least normal way to react to an event that may change your life forever? All my life I've been watching either in movies or a series this story of adopted kids who discovered that their parents are not their real parents. Well, something like that happened to me, only a little more abruptly and strange. I feel like now I'm one of those 3 o'clock in the afternoon soap operas on the Mexican channels that my great aunt, bless her soul, used to watch. You know, those with all the very dramatic incidental music and exaggerated transitions. But to comment on all this, I feel I must tell you about my mother, or well, the mother who raised me. She was characterized all her life as being a sweet woman, who liked plants and always went on weekends and mornings to buy vegetables. If you wanted to rob her, it was enough to see her routine for 2 or 3 days to know how she worked. She was a basic woman, loved in the community and the family, and she was so for many, many years, until her illness came. After a rainy season, she ended up in bed with chest discomfort. She caught a cold for the first few days that only got worse as time went on. And after a couple of operations, the truth was on the table. She wasn't going to finish this year. It feels horrible to tell all this because of what I experienced, but it is perhaps a way to honor her memory. Anyways, when the worst happened, the family was devastated. She was a good mother. I was an only child, and she always made sure nothing was missing on the table. Something particularly helpful when you did not have a husband to help you. That's right, she was a single mother. Because according to what she had told me, when my father found out about the pregnancy, he fled through the back door. Figuratively speaking, of course, and ran away for the rest of his life, in an act that I always considered cowardly. Leaving your pregnant wife about to give birth? No, it's just wrong. But at least he did not count on the fact that she was a good woman, and that she would dedicate her body and soul to bringing up a girl who ended up being on the honor roll at school. However, my life was about to change with the visit of a certain character. My mother. My biological mother, I should say, to speak. A few days after my mom passed away, we already lived with Grandma, so now I'm with her. A woman came knocking at the door asking if I was Lilith. Indeed, I am, and she hugged me in what I felt was somewhat of an awkward act. She didn't cry, she just said, "My child, my little girl, how much you've grown, I see." Okay. Just like that, as if it was a movie. Grandma threw the plate she was holding on the floor, breaking it into 1,000 pieces. "What are you doing here? Get out," Grandma said. A woman that I had seen argue with mall guards. "Is this how you're going to treat me after all this time, Mom?" And I was in the middle of a heated argument and only took a few seconds to start. The woman kept asking if I had been, quote, told the truth. But my grandma just wanted her out of the house, and at first I did not consider the woman to be potentially dangerous because if Grandma knew her, then she must just be someone she had some past quarrel with. I should have realized at first because she resembled my mom. Only in all the commotion I had no mind at all. Grandma was very concerned about what this woman might say as if it were a state secret. And I feel it was. At one point, she said that she would tell me the whole truth if my grandma continued to be so intense. Grandma feared that I would hear something, and it was then that the woman said, "Lilith, greet me and give me a hug, for you're seeing your real mom." My grandma replied, "This girl has only one mother, and she passed away a few days ago. Now get out of here before I call the police." Police? Oh, yeah, she was serious. Grandma told her that if she said anything, she would be dealt with. Still, the woman kept mentioning that if I still had the mole behind my ear, something almost no one knew about, and even I wasn't aware of it until I was 13 when my friend brought it up out of nowhere. At first, I was in shock. You don't know what a mental shock is to hear something like that? I had 1,000 thoughts in my head, with one of them being the most stereotypical of all. I must hate my former mother. Why? I didn't even know myself. Then I hated my supposed birth mother, but I could not fully do that either because I didn't know her. I didn't know how to feel, and seeing me pale and about to faint, my grandma let the woman, I'm sorry, but I have such a hard time calling her mother or mom, stay with us for a few hours. I took a breath and they gave me water and then tried to explain the matter to me as best as they could, which was difficult considering they were constantly interrupting each other to put each other's side of the story in their favor. I had heard the woman's name before, but did not know much of her story. The thing is, years ago, as far back as I can remember, I had a, quote, do your family tree project, the typical thing, and there I heard the name Miriam, as a sister of my mom's who have been estranged from everyone from a long time. Every time somebody mentioned her, everyone felt bad for some reason, and I could see what it was like. It was one of the few times when Mom would become crestfallen, and as I told you, she was a very happy woman, so I did not like to see her like that. I stopped bringing up the subject of Miriam. Well, according to what my grandma Miriam herself told me, she met the man who would become my father, a very handsome guy with a lot of money. Of course, but there was a small problem. The man was married, and out of an extramarital affair, that's right, enter me. More added to my mental shock. Miriam was in a panic since she was now on her own. The man, upon learning that, left her to her own devices to raise me alone. In the end, for one way or the other, I ended up with a history of parental neglect. Pretty much set in stone. Ironic, no? Miriam did not know what to do. Her sister, my mom, supported her in the process, but that was enough. There are about 5 sisters, but I won't go into the whole family tree. I'll just say that those 2 are the youngest and the ones who had stayed with Grandma, and at the house was a mess by then. My mom was a bit of a hippie at the time, and I did not have a partner. Preferring to live her life on the side, I think in the end she was half asexual or something, but my biological mother was a bit envious of that. So she decided to make a decision a bit lightly. Although, according to her, it changed her life forever, and it's no wonder. She decided to run away. She gave birth to me, and one day, maybe a few weeks after I was born, she just left. Just like that, she took a handful of clothing, stuffed them in her medium-sized suitcase, and left without looking back. A search began for her and whereabouts and whatnot, but they never managed to find her. My grandma tells of how the family was shocked after this, looking for Miriam even under rocks, metaphorically. Meanwhile, Miriam tells of how she suffered a life of hardship and abuse, trying to one day make enough money to see me again, but with her inner demons telling her it was a bad idea. She began to explain how hard it is to get ahead when you hide your identity from the world, and Grandma said that they made the process easier for her because after 5 or 6 years, the family gave up and stopped looking for her. But by then it was all done. Her sister decided to raise me as if I were a daughter of her own, saying that I was not to blame for anything that was happening. And it was true. It was going to be a pretty complicated life too, but she did not care as long as she wanted me to be happy. Well, that to me was a real mother, and Miriam can't just come out of the blue and say she's sorry. Although, she did seem a bit upset when she talked to me, and she told me the typical things you expect to hear in situations like this, that she regretted it, that she could not stop thinking about me, and that she wanted to become a millionaire to come back, etc. According to her, she always kept an eye on us, and since she followed us on social networks, always at a safe distance so as not to get caught. Well, it's hard for me to say this, but to a certain extent, I can understand why she did this. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but we're talking about her being, what if, 18 or 19 when it happened. At that age, we feel like the world's going to fall apart on us, even with a baby in the way and having all the difficulties that she had. Well, worse off, of course. It all depended on my other mom, who came through and was able to give me a fairly decent upbringing. My grandma bluntly scolded Miriam, calling her a bad mother and a disgrace, and she talked about how her sister was able to cope even with an outside responsibility that was imposed on her just like that. She was about to have a good job and left me a good sum of money. Well, anyways, that's actually another part of the story, but I feel as if it's better to tell it later. Anyways, Miriam told me that she was now in town and that she understood if I did not want to see her anymore. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to know that your daughter may not want anything to do with you. After all, she recently lost the most important woman in her life, and now she learned that she has someone even more important than her biological mother. Of course, Mom's the one who breeds, not the one who begets necessarily, but still. And now I'm here, writing this never-ending story to find out how the internet will react to it. I'm not sorry you're in shock, but at least put yourself in my position. To think that everything you believe now was a lie, and with what my life will be like from now on. Grandma told the whole family about this, and the truth is that the reactions were not so positive. However, there was something that one of my aunts said that calmed the waters, and that's when I was free to want to know Miriam in depth, because the mother-daughter bond is sacred despite everything we've been through. True, and maybe I'm a little unfair to her, so it would be good to at least give her a chance, right? Grandma's not too happy about it, but even she has to bite her tongue on the matter. At the end of the day, it's my decision, and she has to be happy with it. I'm not saying I'll accept it out of hand either. I'm talking about the fact that she spent 20 years away, and now she has a lot of memories and important moments to catch up on. I'm going out with her tomorrow, and you don't know how nervous I am. Anything can happen, and I'll get to you with the updates as soon as it's all over, because I feel like you deserve to know how this whole thing ends. Update number 1, 2 days later. I know this is a very strange thing to say and admit, but Miriam, I liked her surprisingly well. She's pretty funny and actually cared enough to get to know me. We went out twice these past 2 days, and on the first one, I was the main star. She listened to me every word and managed to get a conversation out of me about almost everything. At the end of the day, I was surprised that I'd hardly spoken, and it's because she just kept asking me more and more questions. She asked me about my childhood memories, my happy times, the parties I had, my friends, where I'd gone to school, and the boys I dated. She showed a genuine interest in learning about her daughter's life. I admit that it caused a bit of a letdown when I talked to her about my dynamics with my previous mom and her sister. She at no time was upset that I referred to her as Mom, and thank goodness, because I said it several times during the conversation. At first it was a mistake, and then it was like, you know what, whatever. But she was aware that if she missed out on raising her daughter, things like this were bound to happen. There were tears, even, but she ended up telling me that the next day we would talk more about it, and that's when I got to hear the real story. My grandma, well, yeah, she's still a little upset about it. And although I wasn't very touched or moved on the first day, I still agreed to a second outing, this time to hear her side of the story. The next day, she took me to a restaurant where she told me that I could order whatever I wanted. So I ordered my favorite food, chicken medallions, and she said it was her favorite food too. Mom almost did not like them because she said that they were very difficult to prepare, and she didn't like them very much also because she was a vegetarian, or well, she had the Mediterranean diet, so she only ate fish, seafood, and things like that. It's partly good to know, have someone who can share such a meal with me, although to say that now she'll be part of my life is a very blunt thing to say. The truth is that, as I say, the conversation was lively, and a lot of things were learned, and she told me how she ended up moving to another state, and with very little savings, where she looked for support in one of those employment agencies that are just, usually, very, very reliable. She was betting everything on everything, and at one point she said she wanted to come back to my life when I turned 16, but it became very complicated for her since she had already formed a life there. She told me she worked as a waitress, cleaning houses, and even a saleswoman in perfume, clothing, and jewelry stores. She told me she had a dream for years, which was to buy me a beautiful pearl necklace and just show up with it on my birthday. She knew that none of my pain could be solved with it, but that it was worth a try. She, in turn, was a few words. Although she told me a lot about her life, she always seemed interested in me leveling the conversation with my stuff as well. She told me that one of the most uncomfortable moments of her life was when she met a man with whom she started a relationship with. For him, she was a complete stranger, and she had told him that she was not from the city. But he could not care less about that. He told her that he wanted to marry her and wanted to start a family together. Miriam says that for a moment she considered it, but recoiled from the idea at the thought that somewhere in the world She might still have a daughter who may or may not know of her existence. Well, guys, the part that actually broke my soul. She confessed to me there were the whole nights or seasons where she could not sleep thinking about all this. She told me more about how, years later, she decided to look up my mom on the internet and found me. It was when I was, I think, 14 years old, and it was quite an impact. She told me that she cried her eyes out and almost lost her shift job because it was just too much for her. She even went to therapy and learned to look at it from a little more positive points of view, seeing it in the sense that at least I was healthy and happy, and understanding the posts that were posted. She knew that I was never really told the truth about my origins. When I asked her about the man she dated, my father, she told me that she lost track of him years ago but believes he may have passed away. By today's standards, he would be at least in his 60s or so, and she told me he wasn't in the best of health. Nothing to worry about though, as it was a matter of smoking so many cigarettes that without that, I could live to be 100 years old. I liked that perspective very much. She laughed, thinking that it was a good thing I managed to bring out more of her family traits, because if I did more of my father's, I'd suddenly realize that I was adopted. I don't know if my father was a different race or something. And then came the most awkward conversation of all. The one that she decided to leave for later since it requires a whole lot of mediation. And now she tells me that she has her life in another city and that if I wanted, I could go very well with her and finish my studies. She proposed it like that and left the cards on the table for the possibility. My grandmother keeps insisting that I should not trust her so much. And I just think that whoever has the attitude that I imagine is because of all these sense of searching that she did regarding Miriam's disappearance. In that case, I think it's harder to forgive something like that. Even living off your daughter, Miriam excuses herself by saying that she once found out about her sister's death. It was her alarm to go back. She didn't want to make a big deal about it, but we all know that's more than inevitable at this point. Well, she would talk to me and try to make peace with Grandma and her other siblings, but it's a long way to go. Just between us, she told me that she did not care much about what others might think. The only person she really cared about was me, and I guess that is understandable. Anyways, I will update you guys again. Update 2 months later. Hey, how are you doing? I don't know how to start writing this. It's such a bitter pill to swallow, but I feel like I don't do it, I won't be able to let it go. The last month of my life has been close to emotional hell as I've been able to experience. Miriam, my biological mother, turned out to be a self-serving person, but in a way that I can't even explain to you enough. To understand what I'm saying, you need to know that my mom, my real mother, the only one who raised me and who recently passed away, worked and sweated like a mule, so she could leave me enough money so that I would not have to worry about the next 10 years. Seriously, I'm not kidding. The nice lady in the neighborhood managed to give me an excessive amount in her inheritance. She left it all to me, her sole heir, saying that I could do with it as I pleased, or at least in theory. It turns out that my mom had put all that money inside a savings account to which she transferred it all to a cryptocurrency investment program. That, according to her research, looked quite profitable, to the point of saying that in a couple years she could have her own $1 million. As it turned out, she left this in an unsteady market, which she left to me because according to her I would do well with it due to my investing skills. An aspect of my life that I don't often talk about. The whole inheritance thing was something that I had not gone into much detail of, because with Mom's death and Miriam's appearance, you must know how overwhelmed one can get with it. And it seemed that someone wanted a piece of the cake that Mom left behind. I tell you, Miriam was strange for a few days, telling me several things about her financial problems and how much she was sorry to show up in my life with them. Keep in mind that I was at a very vulnerable stage. I just found my missing mom. So, I was susceptible to whatever happened to me. Anyways, sometimes we would both go out, and I would end up paying for things, starting to generate a sense of pity for her. It was something that was born to me, but somehow manipulated by her. After a while, things became a bit more serious. She told me about a certain debt that she had that she might have to go back to her city to continue working. She told me that in reality, the visit she made to me had been greatly extended and that the reason for her having made it in the first place had been the death of her sister, since she did not know how I was going to be. Had my mom not died, she might not have even shown up. Something that made me get really sad. Also, the fact that she was offering me to go away with her after I finished my studies, when in fact she had several pending accounts. Tell me, how can you offer water if you live in the desert? It seemed illogical and even stupid, but well, I don't want to repeat how I felt back then, and that's when I started with my proposal, which I dare say she had already calculated. First, I considered giving her some money, and then I told her that once I graduated, we might as well help each other. I had not said yes to her proposal to move in, but at least I could help her out a little bit. Her situation discouraged me quite a bit, as I imagined her in a very detrimental scenario, and that's when I owned in on the fact that she was my birth mother, enough to feel that I had to do something about it. But it all ended up being a facade, and I discovered it by mere chance of life. On one of the days we were together, we went to the movies, and she got lost for a moment just before it was our turn to enter the theater. When I found her, she was taking a phone call, and I heard her say something like, "Relax, I'll have the money in a week." After that, chaos. Just a few days later, she brought up the subject of my mom's money and how she was going to use it. She did not quite understand how I would handle it and told me that if I wanted to, she could help me manage it. That's when a lot of pieces fell into the puzzle. I asked her pointedly if I, needed that money, and she said that she could help me use it in a good way, so I committed a small but mighty act of revenge, only I was quite doubtful, and I'm glad it was all true because it was worth it. In the end, I passed on such a large debt to her that I think it'll take her 2 lifetimes to repay. My mom would be proud. My real mom. So, it just so happens that the money Mom left me was merely low-margin speculative, and while I don't quite understand what the cryptocurrency thing's like, I do know that their markets are very unstable. And if you're not a certified expert trader, my friend, well, those are not waters to navigate. But of course, seeing all that my mom had left to invest, Miriam's mouth watered. So I decided to do something risky. I passed her the money management account thinking that if there was a positive movement, she could well take all that money home, and guess what happened? Oh, nothing, just the biggest betrayal in the world. She was gone. Just like that. A day after I gave her the money, she left. Without saying goodbye, without sending a letter, and blocking me and my family from her contact phones. We tried to reach her with the police in her city, but the information we gave them to apprehend her was false. She gave me a false address, and even had left with her hands full of inheritance. My inheritance. That destroyed me, finished me as a person, and made me think of so many things, ranging from her lying to me from the beginning to doing just this to see the opportunity present itself. My birth mother, who left me abandoned for years, was now stealing from me, and that's a level of baseness that can't even be considered human. But on the bright side, like a virus, money was not the only thing I passed on to her. It turns out that the market I put the money into just before I gave it to Miriam went down, shockingly, and ended up in the red, down nearly 1,000 percentile. Of course, for somebody who knows how to move it in the environment, it was something foreseeable, but she preferred to be smarter and left before even figuring out how to invest correctly. It quickly went into the red numbers, and that's when the call started. It was comical because while Miriam was calling me, I was watching the market plummet. She was yelling at me in messages while I was just sending her emojis to make her angrier. I would tell her that if she wanted to punish her daughter so badly, she would come and do it in front of me. Among the things she was telling me, she told me about how she was counting on that money to get out of some debt, since she had lied to me and the jobs that she had were fake. She had a long history of scamming people. Doing that in itself is wrong, but to your own daughter? That's pretty disgusting loneliness, if you ask me. Anyways, now, with all that money she does not have, how will she get out of the new debt that she's in? Well, I don't know, and I ignore it. I don't look for her online anymore, and I'm pretty sure that she won't be showing up at the front door for a good while. I feel like my birth mother managed to give me the last bit of support, and it makes me feel like I had a good mother in life. In the end, this was a bitter pill to swallow and talk about by the whole family, and whether I like it or not, it's something that will mark me forever. I don't know how to see things now, other than that my mother, the one who was always there for me, was able to give me the strength and wisdom to handle even the worst of situations. About Miriam, I don't want to know more. Among her last messages was one that she could not even come to visit us because of the great expense involved, so I gather that unless she wins the lottery, she won't be able to have the benefit of a daughter for a long, long time.